The day started like any other, with the usual hangover and the crappy instant coffee that tasted like regret. Titcho Velkin slouched at his rusty metal desk, flipping through a mountain of digital paperwork that could drown a small starship. Another glorious day in the most electrifying city, this side of the asteroid belt, he muttered to himself, because talking to yourself is perfectly sane when you're surrounded by idiots. Titcho was an engineer, not the glamorous, world-saving kind, though, more like the janitor of the technological world, fixing things that other people didn't even know could break. Today, he had the joy of overseeing the solar farm out on the city's edge. It was a job that paid like crap but came with the luxury of complaining about it. As he rode the maglev train toward the outskirts, the city skyline loomed over him like a giant steel middle finger, constantly reminding him of his place in the universe. The buildings were a patchwork of concrete and neon, held together by dreams and duct tape. The city was alive with noise, people scurrying like ants on a particularly stressful picnic. "Hey, Titcho," a voice boomed, snapping him out of his existential commute. It was Jax, his co-worker, looking like the human embodiment of a bad decision. "You hear about the power grid issues?" "No, Jax. I don't spend my mornings reading the news in the shower like some kind of psychopath," Titcho shot back. Jax grinned like he just solved world hunger with nothing but a toaster. "Apparently the solar farm's been acting weird. City officials are losing their shit. They're blaming the usual suspects, cyber terrorists, rogue AI, my aunt's cooking." Titcho rolled his eyes so hard he could see his brain. "Great. Sounds like it's gonna be another let's find the idiot to blame day." Upon arriving at the solar farm, Titcho noticed that something was definitely off. The usual hum of the panels was replaced by an ominous silence, the kind that screams run in horror movies but is often ignored by idiots with a death wish. He wandered over to the main control unit, a decrepit relic that seemed ready to die of boredom. As he fiddled with the controls, a series of bizarre readings flashed across the screen. He squinted, hoping it was a glitch, but the numbers were as real as his student debt. "Jax, get over here," Titcho yelled, because when things go south it's always good to have company in hell. Jax ambled over, peering at the screen like a cat watching a particularly interesting fish. "Whoa, what's all this? Best I can tell, these panels aren't just soaking up the sun. They're soaking up something else, something stronger." "These readings are off the charts." Jax nodded sagely, possibly understanding nothing. "Maybe we're looking at an upgrade, more juice for our buck, or maybe it's aliens." "Always wanted to meet the little green bastards," Titcho snorted. "Yeah, because that would be the icing on this shit cake of a job. Just what I need. Alien overlords." But as they poked around, the sense of unease grew. Titcho noticed conduits running from the panels, snaking underground like the tentacles of a mechanical kraken. They definitely weren't in the original schematics. Did someone expand the system down here and forget to send a memo? Titcho wondered aloud, knowing full well that negligence was a fine tradition in the city. Jax shrugged. "Beats me. But hey, maybe if we follow these wires, we'll find that pot of gold or whatever it is that engineers dream about." "Yeah, right. Or we'll find a nest of cyberats." "One can only hope." Titcho sighed and started tracing the conduits. They walked along the path of the cables, each step taking them deeper into a mystery that reeked of corporate cover-ups and bad luck. The tunnels were a labyrinth dimly lit by flickering lights that seemed to say, "We're trying, but no guarantees." Finally, they came upon a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," as if that ever stopped anyone. With a combination of technical prowess and the universal engineer's tool, a crowbar, they forced it open. Inside, they found something that could only be described as, well, that's just fucking great. A massive room filled with alien tech, pulsing like a heartbeat, with a giant cannon pointed toward the sky. It was like walking into a sci-fi movie, but without the popcorn or the reassuring thought that you could walk out afterward. "What in the hell is this?" Jax asked, his voice tinged with awe and a hint of stupidity. My best guess, Ticho said, attempting to keep his voice steady. A giant freaking laser, and not the we'll cut the cake at a wedding kind. Jax let out a low whistle. So, not part of the usual setup, not unless the city council's planning on vaporizing municipal waste in style, Ticho replied, sarcasm dripping like oil from a leaky engine. The implications started to crash down on Ticho like a badly executed landing. The power grid issues, the bizarre readings, the alien tech. The pieces of a very ugly puzzle. You thinking what I'm thinking? Jax asked, scratching his head. If it involves running and screaming, then yes, Ticho's mind raced. Why would aliens, or anyone really, hide a superweapon in the middle of a city? And how did they manage to slip it past the city's security, which was about as solid as a wet paper bag? Jax broke the silence with his usual brand of optimism. Maybe they just want to power a giant disco ball. You know, throw a rave even the universe would envy. Ticho gave him a look that could melt steel. Yeah, and then they'll serve cake and ice cream. No, Jax, this isn't a party. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Before they could ponder the cosmic joke that was their lives any further, the ground shook like a toddler hopped up on sugar. Alarms blared, the sound of a city realizing it might have a slight alien problem. Guess we better report this, Jax said, stating the obvious in the way only he could. Yeah, because nothing says job security like being the bearer of bad news, Ticho replied, already regretting his career choices. The path back to the city was a blur of adrenaline and existential dread. Ticho's mind was a storm of questions, each more troubling than the last. Who were these aliens? What did they want? And why, in the name of all that was cosmic, did it have to be on his shift? As they reached the city, the skyline was alight with chaos, a vivid reminder that when shit hits the fan, it doesn't bother with a warning. Ticho stopped, looking at the mess of humanity scurrying about, each person blissfully unaware of the ticking time bomb above their heads. Why do we always get the fun jobs? Jax shrugged. I guess the universe just loves us too damn much. Ticho let out a dry chuckle, the kind that teetered on the edge of hysteria. I need a drink. A strong one. And maybe a new job, you and me both, buddy, Jax agreed, patting him on the back like they'd just saved the world, when in reality, they'd only uncovered a whole new level of hell. As they walked toward the city center, the chaos around them growing, Ticho knew one thing for sure. Today was going to suck. Big time. And tomorrow wasn't looking much better. In the distance, the city's main power plant hummed ominously, a giant question mark hanging over all their heads. And somewhere out there, the Zelter were probably laughing their alien asses off at the humans scrambling below. Ticho glanced at Jax, whose face was a mask of grim determination, or possibly constipation. Ready to save the world, Jax grinned, the kind of grin that said nope, not really. But when has that ever stopped us? Together, they plunged into the chaos, armed with nothing but blind optimism and a stubborn refusal to die quietly. And as Ticho took a deep breath, he couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, humanity was in for its most creative triumph yet. As the city continued its impersonation of a kicked anthill, Ticho was feeling the special kind of headache that you get when you realize your day involves aliens and possibly saving the world. Not exactly what he signed up for when he decided on a career in engineering. He glanced at Jax, who was busy trying to unravel the mysteries of the universe, or maybe just his shoelaces. It was hard to tell with him sometimes. Ever think we should have just stuck to fixing broken toasters? Ticho asked, dodging a woman in a business suit who was sprinting like her hair was on fire, which, given the situation, wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. Jax shrugged, looking around at the chaos with the detached curiosity of someone watching a mildly interesting nature documentary. Nah, this is way more exciting. Toasters don't usually try to blow you up. True, but they don't come with existential dread either, Ticho retorted, weaving through a crowd that smelled like fear and bad cologne. As they headed toward the city's central node, Ticho pulled out a battered communicator. Lies. Their go-to hacker and someone whose brain was wired in ways most people would consider terrifying was their next call. If anyone could make sense of the alien tech, it was her. You there. We could use your particular brand of technomagic, Ticho said into the device, hoping she wasn't in the middle of one of her infamous deep dives into the dark web. Those tended to involve a lot of shouting and coffee stains. After a few moments of static that sounded suspiciously like someone cursing a malfunctioning toaster, her voice crackled through. Ticho, what have you blown up this time? Nothing yet. But give us a minute, Ticho said, shooting Jax a look that said don't touch anything. We've got alien tech hidden under the solar farm. Need you to help us figure out what the hell it's doing before the city goes full apocalypse. Alien tech. And you didn't call me sooner. You know how much I love new toys, Ree replied with the enthusiasm of a kid hearing the ice cream truck. Trust me, it's a real party down here, Ticho said, half joking. But bring your gear. We need to get past some serious encryption. On my way, Ree said, signing off with a burst of static that was oddly comforting in its familiarity. A short maglev ride later, during which Ticho tried not to think about the increasingly erratic power flickers along the train's route, they arrived back at the solar farm, where the air hummed with a sense of impending doom. Or maybe it was just the caffeine finally kicking in. Ree was already there, sporting her trademark goggles and a backpack full of gear that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. She gave them a nod that was equal parts hello and I told you so. So, alien tech, she said, clapping her hands together like she was about to conduct a symphony of chaos. Where's the patient? Ticho led her to the control room, pointing out the conduits that spiderwebbed out from the panels. We've got readings off the charts, and we found a giant laser thing aimed at the stars. Just your average Tuesday. Ree's eyes lit up like a kid in a candy store. A sky laser? Sweet. Let's see what kind of encryption we're dealing with. As Ree got to work, her fingers dancing over the controls like a virtuoso, Ticho and Jax stood guard, trying not to think about just how much trouble they were in. The city was in full-blown meltdown mode, and here they were playing detective with alien tech. You ever wonder why we're always the ones stuck in the middle of this mess? Jax asked, leaning against a console that probably controlled something important. Ticho sighed. Because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and apparently we're its favorite punchline. Ree's voice interrupted their musings. Okay, I'm in. And you're not going to like this. Spit it out, Ticho said, bracing himself for bad news delivered with a side of snark. This setup is designed to draw energy from the city's power grid, amplify it, and then channel it into that laser. From what I can see, it's meant to send a signal, a big one, like wake the neighbors big, Ticho groaned. So it's not just a fancy light show for the end of the world. Nope, reconfirmed, her eyes glued to the screen. It's signaling something out there. The question is, what are they trying to wake up? Probably something that'll ruin our day, Jax said with a shrug, ever the optimist. Before Ticho could ponder the implications of cosmic wake-up calls, a sound like 100 cats being electrocuted at once filled the air. An unsettling metallic whir, followed by a voice that could only be described as alien trying to sound approachable. Humans. The voice boomed from nowhere and everywhere at once, like a bad PA system. We are the Zelter envoy. Cease your interference. Ticho exchanged a glance with Ree and Jax. Well, that's subtle. Ignoring the thinly veiled threat, Ree continued her work, her fingers a blur. A little busy here, Mr. Alien voice. The disembodied voice continued, apparently unfazed by sarcasm. Your actions are inconsequential. You cannot comprehend the purpose of this device. Jax snorted. Yeah, try us. We've got plenty of time until the world ends. Ticho smirked, stepping closer to the console. Tell you what, Mr. Zelter, why don't you enlighten us and in return we'll stop poking your precious toy? A moment of silence followed, the kind that usually precedes a cosmic smiting. But instead of divine retribution, the voice returned, this time tinged with something that sounded suspiciously like confusion. Your request is illogical. Human behavior is unpredictable. Welcome to Earth, Ree quipped, typing furiously as she bypassed another layer of encryption. Where logic goes to die, the Zelter voice sputtered as if trying to process the clusterfuck that was human interaction. You will cease immediately. Or what? You'll taunt us a second time, Ticho asked, trying to keep his tone light even as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Ree's screen pinged and she grinned with the satisfaction of someone who just hacked the universe. Got it. I've disabled the main link. They can't send their signal. What have you done? The voice boomed, now with a hint of actual panic. Just a little human ingenuity, Jack said, puffing out his chest like he'd just conquered the galaxy. The floor shook again, a not-so-gentle reminder that the situation was still precarious. Ticho didn't need any more encouragement. Ree, can we shut it down completely? On it, she replied, fingers a blur once more. But they're trying to re-establish the connection. I'll need a few minutes. Minutes we might not have, Ticho muttered, eyeing the ceiling like it might come crashing down at any moment. Jax picked up a piece of conduit, hefting it like a makeshift club. Guess it's time for a little manual persuasion. Before they could enact Jax's not-so-brilliant plan, the door to the control room slid open with a hiss, revealing a Zelter envoy, a towering figure that looked like someone had crossbred a squid with a Christmas tree, all tentacles and glowing orbs. Cease your interference, it demanded, though the effect was somewhat marred by its resemblance to a particularly festive seafood platter. Ticho took a step forward, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Look, Squiddy, we're kind of attached to our city. Can't you find somewhere else to play with your big scary laser? The Zelter hesitated, as if consulting an intergalactic rulebook that didn't quite cover sarcastic engineers. Your actions are irrelevant. This operation must continue, the envoy insisted, its tentacles twitching with what might have been irritation. Ree didn't look up from her work, though Ticho could see the corners of her mouth twitching in amusement. You know, maybe if you said please, we'd consider stopping. The Zelter's glowing orbs flickered, possibly the alien equivalent of rolling its eyes. Humans are unpredictable. Yeah, we get that a lot, Jack said, twirling the conduit like he was about to audition for a martial arts movie. So what's it gonna be? Peaceful negotiations or an old-fashioned beatdown? Before the alien could respond, the lights flickered again and the console in front of Ree beeped triumphantly. Done. Systems offline. No more alien wake-up call. The Zelter envoy's glowing orbs dimmed, its tentacles drooping like a deflated balloon. You have made a grave mistake. Ticho shrugged, stepping back with a sigh of relief. Not the first, won't be the last. Now, if you don't mind, we'd like to keep our city in one piece. Yeah, and maybe you can find a nice, uninhabited planet to play with next time, Jax added, waving the conduit like a flag of victory. The envoy hesitated, its form shimmering as if debating whether to go full alien tantrum or just leave quietly. Finally, it turned, retreating with as much dignity as a giant glowing squid could muster. As the door slid shut behind it, Ree leaned back in her chair, letting out a breath she probably didn't realize she'd been holding. Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Agreed, Ticho said, rubbing the back of his neck. But now what? We've got a city on the verge of panic and an alien race that's probably not too happy with us. Jax shrugged, tossing the conduit aside. We do what we always do, wing it and hope for the best. Ticho let out a dry laugh, the kind that masked exhaustion with bravado. Yeah, that sounds about right. Come on, let's see if we can salvage what's left of the day. As they made their way back through the tunnels, the city's power grid slowly returning to normal, Ticho couldn't shake the feeling that they were in for a lot more trouble than they'd bargained for. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they'd done the impossible, stopped an alien disaster with little more than wit, sarcasm, and a lot of luck. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. At least for now, it would have to be. The city's lights blinked like a disco ball on its last leg, an epilepsy warning masquerading as a power grid. Velkin supposed it was a fitting metaphor for life in this god-forsaken place. Unreliable, stressful, and constantly on the verge of collapse. As he and Ree trudged through the solar farm corridors, Jax lagging behind as usual, Titcho couldn't help but feel like they were the last sane people in a universe gone mad. But then again, sanity was relative, especially when you were trying to outsmart aliens who thought they were running a tech support scam. "So what's plan B?" Jax asked, still wielding his conduit like a man who thought he was a samurai, despite the fact he looked more like someone trying to fish for compliments with a stick. Plan B. "It's like Plan A, but with more desperation and less forethought," Titcho replied, the jitters from too much caffeine making him sound like a sarcastic jackhammer. Ree blew a strand of hair out of her face as they neared the control room. Fantastic. Nothing like a bit of reckless abandon to spice up the day. Their first attempt to shut down the alien tech had been a colossal failure, like trying to put out a fire with a thimble of water. The Zelter had escalated their efforts, causing rolling blackouts across the city that were only exacerbated by the panic of a population that couldn't even handle a slight drizzle without losing its collective mind. Inside the control room, the consoles flickered like they were trying to communicate in Morse code, probably spelling out "you're screwed." Ree dropped her gear with a sigh that spoke volumes of casual exasperation. "All right, let's get this over with. We've got a solar farm to hack and a city to save." Titcho nodded, his eyes scanning the spaghetti mess of alien and human technology. "We're inserting a virus this time. Something nasty, like a digital version of the plague." "Charming," Ree said, cracking her knuckles before diving into the code as if it were her personal playground. "Let's just hope this virus doesn't require a hazmat suit." Jax leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And if it doesn't work, then we pray the Zelter have a weakness for bad puns," Titcho muttered, elbow deep in a panel that seemed to have been designed by someone who really hated engineers. "Because that's all I've got left." Ree's fingers tapped out a rhythm on the keyboard, a chaotic symphony that somehow made sense in her head. "Starting the upload. If this works, the Zelter system should choke on our virus like a cat hacking up a hairball." "Optimistic imagery," Jax noted, glancing at the monitors that were already going haywire, as if the very idea of a virus had sent them into a tizzy. Ree grinned. "Hey, why go for subtle when you can go for disgusting?" The room buzzed with tension as the virus wormed its way into the alien systems, a digital Trojan horse loaded with enough malware to make the average IT guy cry. Titcho watched the progress bar inch forward with all the enthusiasm of a snail on a treadmill. "Any moment now," he said, more to convince himself than anyone else. But as the bar approached completion, something unexpected happened. The consoles flared to life, displaying a message in alien script that Titcho didn't need Ree to translate. "Nice try, humans." "What the hell?" Titcho slammed his fist against the console, as if that would somehow improve their chances. "Shouldn't this be working?" Ree's expression soured, the first signs of real frustration cracking her usual veneer of cool confidence. "They've got countermeasures, damn sophisticated ones. It's like they anticipated everything." Jax chuckled darkly. "Maybe they're just used to dealing with persistent idiots. Or maybe they just hate surprises as much as we do," Titcho added, rubbing his temples as if that would stave off the headache brewing behind his eyes. "And now what?" Jax asked, his tone a mix of genuine curiosity and the kind of gallows humor that usually reserved for funerals and tax audits. "We up the stakes," Ree said, rolling her shoulders like a prizefighter preparing for another round. "I've got a backup plan, but it's a little more hands-on." "Hands-on how?" Titcho inquired, wary of any plan that involved more manual labor than sarcasm and caffeine. Ree began unpacking a small device that looked suspiciously like a bomb or possibly a very aggressive toaster. "We're going to manually bypass their security systems. Old school style." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Old school as in?" as in we plug this sucker directly into their mainframe and hope it doesn't blow us all to kingdom come, she replied, a gleam of mischief in her eyes that suggested she relished the danger more than she let on. You know, Titcho said, eyeing the device with the skepticism of a man who'd been burned by faulty tech before, if we come out of this alive, I'm never complaining about digital paperwork again. Jax laughed, a short bark of sound that was more humorless than anything. That's the spirit. Nothing like near-death experiences to put things in perspective. Ree pointed towards the far wall, where a series of conduits snaked their way into an ominous-looking server. We need to get this hooked up over there, and we need to do it fast before the Zelters send another envoy to swat us like intergalactic pests. Great, Titcho said, glancing at Jax. You get to play hero with a potentially explosive toaster. I'll provide moral support from a safe distance. Jax grinned, hefting the device with all the enthusiasm of a child handed a shiny new toy. And here I thought you cared. With a few deft maneuvers that suggested he'd spent way too much time around questionable machinery, Jax started threading the device's cables into the server. Ree monitored his progress, barking directions like an impatient coach. Careful with that connection, she warned, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. This thing's touchier than a diva at karaoke night. Titcho paced the room, his mind racing through contingency plans that might save their skins if things went south. In case this doesn't work, he began, we should probably have an exit strategy. Why bother? Ree quipped without looking up. If this doesn't work, we probably won't have much of a planet left to escape to. Morbid, but fair, Jax said, his grin still plastered across his face despite the stakes. And here I thought you were the optimist. The only thing I'm optimistic about is our ability to screw this up in spectacular fashion, Ree replied, finally looking up as Jax finished the last connection. With a deep breath that was more nervous than meditative, Ree activated the device. The room dimmed, the lights flickering ominously as the alien system seemed to swallow the virus whole. For a moment, it felt like they might actually have the upper hand, like they were finally pulling the strings instead of dancing to someone else's tune. But the victory was short-lived. The screens went black, then flashed a single word in bold, angry letters. Failure. Well, that's discouraging, Titcho muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own disappointment. Ree smacked the console with a sound like a gunshot, her frustration finally boiling over. Damn it, we were so close. Jax shrugged, not so much defeated as he was resigned. Story of our lives, right? At least we can say we tried. Titcho rubbed his eyes, exhaustion and adrenaline mixing into a toxic cocktail that left him feeling hollow. So what now? We're out of tricks and the Zelter aren't exactly known for their mercy. Ree leaned back, her expression hardening into one of grim determination. We regroup, we rethink, and we hit them again. Harder this time, Jax nodded, his usual humor absent as the reality of their situation sunk in. Sounds like a plan. A suicidal, probably doomed plan, but a plan nonetheless. Titcho allowed himself a small, sardonic smile. Well, that's something at least. Let's just hope our luck holds out a little longer. As they gathered their gear and prepared to face whatever fresh hell awaited outside the solar farm, Titcho couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a game they didn't fully understand, against opponents who held all the cards. But that was a problem for later. Right now, they had a city to save and a plan to improvise. And if they were lucky, and probably a little bit crazy, then maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to pull it off. And if not, well, they'd always been good at making the best of a bad situation. With a final nod, Titcho, Ree, and Jax stepped out into the chaos, ready to face whatever came next with the kind of reckless abandon that had gotten them this far. Whether it was enough to see them through the end was anyone's guess, but that was the beauty of life on the edge, wasn't it? Never knowing if you'd make it out alive, but always willing to try. Because in a universe that seemed determined to crush them, that was the one thing they could always count on. The control room's air was thick with the smell of burnt circuits and frustration. Ticho wiped a smear of grease off his forehead, knowing it was just transferring from one part of his face to another. Right, he muttered to no one in particular. So that didn't work. What's next? Pray to the tech gods for a software miracle. Ree had already moved on, her fingers dancing over another console like she was playing a particularly aggressive piano piece. Let's face it, the tech gods have forsaken us, she said, her voice tinged with the kind of sardonic amusement that implied she'd always known this would happen. They're probably having a good laugh at our expense right now. Jax, who had taken to pacing the room like a caged animal, stopped in his tracks. So, we just keep fiddling with this junk until something doesn't explode in our faces. Sounds like a recipe for a long, painful afternoon. Patience, my dear Jax, Ree chided, eyes fixed on the screen. Just because the Zelter are smarter in a let's enslave the galaxy kind of way doesn't mean we're out of options. Remember, their rigidity is their Achilles heel. Ticho nodded slowly, a thought bubbling up from the depths of his caffeine-addled brain. Right. They might have tech that makes Iors look like a caveman's toolkit, but they are probably not expecting us to improvise like this. We could take advantage of their predictable nature. By doing what exactly? Jax asked, his tone a mix of skepticism and hope, as if he were equally ready to be inspired or disappointed. Ree looked up, mischief glinting in her eyes. We go analog, baby. The Zelter think in ones and zeros, but we can think in whatever the hell we damn well please. They've got no idea how chaotic and unpredictable we can be. Ticho raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. You've got a plan, don't you? Something more than just poking their systems with a stick and hoping they flinch. Yeah, Ree replied, her voice now tinged with excitement. We take advantage of the chaos. The city's a mess, right? Let's use that. We create more noise, more chaos, until their systems can't distinguish our attacks from the usual human madness. Jax laughed, a sound that was more bark than chuckle. So what? We give them a taste of the average human day and hope they run screaming, more or less, Ree shrugged. We'll need to get into one of their outposts, spread some misinformation, scramble their communications. Make them think the problem's bigger than it is. Ticho rubbed his chin, contemplating the gamble. It's a long shot, but then again, so's everything else we've tried. Let's do it. But first, we need to get back to the city. Outside the control room, the solar farm corridors were as cheerful as a funeral march. The lights flickered intermittently, casting ominous shadows that danced along the walls as the trio made their way towards the exit. Ticho's boots squelched underfoot, a constant reminder of the swampy state their mission was in. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages, Ree's communicator buzzed, the signal weak but insistent. She fished it out of her pocket, flipping it open with a practiced motion. What now? The voice on the other end crackled with static. Cities, chaos, powers out, Zelter, evacuation. Isn't that just peachy? Ticho grumbled, rolling his eyes. The one time we actually need the power to stay out and everyone loses their minds over it. Typical, Jax agreed, shaking his head. Would it kill people to just sit quietly in the dark for a bit? Maybe play some board games by candlelight. Ree sighed, pocketing the communicator. Guess we've got our work cut out for us. Let's hustle. The last thing we need is to get caught in city-wide pandemonium. They reached the exit, the door creaking open to reveal a maglev train waiting on the tracks like an obedient pet. Ticho hesitated for a moment, eyeing the transport with suspicion. You think it's still working? Jax snorted. Let's hope so, or we're hoofing it back. And I'm not exactly wearing my running shoes. The train's interior was as inviting as a dentist's waiting room, but at least it was moving. They settled into their seats, the hum of the maglev providing a comforting background noise as they hurtled towards the city. All right, Ticho said, leaning back and closing his eyes. Let's think this through. We need to make enough noise to distract the Zelter, but not so much that we end up adding to the chaos without any benefit. I'll get into their comms network, Ree offered, her mind already spinning with possibilities. Flood it with misinformation. Make them think there's a rebellion brewing in every corner of the city. Jax grinned. And while they're chasing ghosts, we slip in and take out their control systems, like playing hide-and-seek with a blindfolded giant. Ticho chuckled, a low, sardonic sound. And here I thought we were the underdogs. Turns out we're just really annoying gnats. The train glided into the city station, the doors sliding open with a hiss. They stepped out into the chaos, the streets alive with the sounds of panic and confusion. It was as if someone had turned the city's volume knob up to 11 and then walked away. "Lovely," Jax muttered, dodging a group of people running in the opposite direction. "Just the kind of welcome I was hoping for." "Stick together," Ree instructed, leading them through the throng. "We need to get to their nearest outpost without getting trampled." They wove through the crowd, Ticho occasionally glancing at the sky as if expecting an alien mothership to descend at any moment. "Do you think the Zelter are watching all this and laughing?" he wondered aloud. "Probably," Ree replied, not missing a beat. "But we'll see who's laughing when we turn their systems inside out." Their destination was a nondescript building nestled between two skyscrapers, its exterior as unassuming as a tax office. But inside, it was a different story. They'd stumbled into the heart of Zelter operations in the city, a hive of alien activity disguised as a mundane human structure. "Time to work some magic," Ree said, cracking her knuckles as they slipped inside. "Hope you boys are ready for a bit of chaos engineering." Ticho smirked. "Chaos is the one thing we seem to do well. Let's make it count." Ree got to work on the nearest console, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that suggested she had more than a little caffeine in her system. Meanwhile, Ticho and Jax kept an eye on the door, their senses on high alert for any signs of trouble. "We need to get them to spread their forces thin," Ree explained, her eyes glued to the screen. "If they think we're everywhere, they'll be nowhere." Ticho nodded, his mind a blur of possibilities. "We need to make them doubt, second-guess every move. They might be advanced, but their overconfidence is a weakness." Jax chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "And humans have always been good at exploiting weaknesses. It's basically our superpower." As Ree's fingers danced over the keys, the outpost systems began to come alive with false alerts and fabricated crises. The Zelter, with their rigid thinking and reliance on technology, would be too slow to adapt, too set in their ways to see through the ruse. "Let's hope they fall for it," Ticho said, watching as the screens filled with a cacophony of warnings and alerts. "We need all the time we can get." Ree nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's to never underestimate the power of human ingenuity or stupidity. They often go hand in hand." The outpost was soon a flurry of activity, the Zelter scrambling to respond to the phantom threats Ree had conjured. It was like watching a ballet of chaos, each move designed to sow confusion and disorder. "Let's move," Ree said, snapping her laptop shut. "We've done all we can here. Time to get to the real fun part." They slipped out of the building, the city still a riot of noise and movement. But now, there was a sense of purpose to their actions, a feeling that they were finally turning the tide in their favor. As they made their way through the chaotic streets, Ticho couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. It was a slim one, but in a universe that seemed determined to crush them, a slim chance was better than none. "Next stop, Zelter Central," Jax said, his voice tinged with anticipation. "Let's show them what humans are really made of. Chaos, coffee, and a healthy dose of stubbornness," Ree suggested, her wry smile back in place. Ticho chuckled, the sound buoyed by the thrill of impending victory. "Sounds about right. Let's go raise some hell." With renewed determination, the trio plunged into the chaos, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because when it came down to it, that's what humanity did best: adapting, surviving, thriving against the odds. In a universe where nothing was certain, they'd take their chances, armed with little more than their wits and a willingness to fight against impossible odds. And if that wasn't enough, well, they'd make sure to go down swinging. The maglev train ride back into the chaos of the city was as smooth as a politician's promise. just the bare minimum of functional, while hiding a multitude of sins. Ticho leaned against the wall of the carriage, arms crossed and eyes narrowed like a cat staring at an overzealous dog. Ree, sitting opposite, was fiddling with her communicator, its screen flickering like it was caught between life and death. Jax, leaning against the door, was whistling a tune that seemed designed to irritate everyone within earshot. They'd barely set foot off the train when the ground itself shook, a deep, ominous rumble that had the subtlety of a brick through a window. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Jax remarked dryly, his lips twisting into a smirk. "I mean, who doesn't love a good impending doom?" Ree glanced up, her expression a mix of frustration and amusement. "Probably the Zelter finally deciding to show off their giant death ray," she said, sarcasm dripping from her words like acid in a rainstorm. "About time they tried to finish us off properly," Ticho said, rolling his shoulders as if preparing for a long day of standing. "I was getting tired of their half-assed attempts at genocide." Jack snorted. "Guess this is the part where we either save the day or die trying, huh?" "Yeah, well," Ree replied, her fingers tapping a rapid beat on her thigh. "I've never been much for dying. Seems like a waste of good talent." As they trudged through the crumbling streets, the city around them was in full-blown panic mode. People were running in every direction, their faces masks of fear and desperation. It was like a particularly chaotic Black Friday sale, only with fewer bargains and more existential dread. Overhead, the sky was an unsettling shade of bruise, the sort of color that suggested nature itself was in on the joke being humanity's impending obliteration, courtesy of the Zelter's superlaser. "Anyone else feel like we're the punchline to some cosmic joke?" Ticho asked, dodging a stray dog that seemed to have joined the chaos for the sport of it. "Yes, but I've never been fond of being laughed at," Ree replied, her voice a low growl of determination. "Let's make sure we get the last laugh." They reached the outskirts of the city where their objective loomed, Zelter Central, an architectural insult to human design, all sharp edges and glowing bits that said, "Hi, we're aliens and we're here to ruin your day." "Okay, let's not get our hopes up," Jax muttered, eyeing the structure with a wariness usually reserved for old milk. "But if we can take this place out, maybe we can at least buy some time." Ree nodded, her gaze fixed on the building like a hawk eyeing a particularly fat mouse. "First, we need to deal with the security systems. They're bound to be a nightmare." "Good thing nightmares are your specialty," Ticho said with a grin that barely reached his eyes. Ree rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Compliments later, survival first." They approached the building, ducking into a shadowed alcove as a patrol of Zelter drones zipped by overhead, their engines humming a tune that was more funeral march than welcome wagon. "Right," Ree whispered, pulling out her scrambler, a piece of tech that looked as reliable as a politician's promise but had a better track record. "Let's make some noise." She activated the device, and the air around them seemed to shimmer, distorting like a heat wave. Ticho could almost hear the drone circuits frying as Ree's device sowed chaos in their systems. "That should give us a window," she said, tucking the scrambler back in her pocket with a self-satisfied smirk. "Let's move." Inside, the building was a maze of corridors that seemed to have been designed by someone with a grudge against floor plans. The walls were smooth and featureless, the lighting a harsh, clinical white that made everything feel far too exposed. As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, Ticho couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was the kind of sensation that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up like soldiers on parade. "Zelter must have eyes everywhere," Jax muttered, his gaze flicking from one shadowy corner to the next. "Yeah, well, let's hope they are as blind as their drones," Ree replied, her fingers brushing against the walls as if trying to sense any hidden panels or traps. They reached what looked like a central hub, a room filled with consoles and screens displaying streams of alien data. The air was thick with the scent of burning electronics, a smell that suggested someone somewhere had really messed up. "Here we go," Ree said, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Let's see if we can shut this place down." Ticho and Jax took up positions by the doors, watching the corridor for any signs of unwelcome guests while Ree got to work. "How's it looking?" Ticho asked, glancing over his shoulder to where Ree was furiously typing, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Complicated," she replied without looking up. "Their systems are like a labyrinth built on shifting sands. One wrong move and we could trigger an alarm." "Great," Jax muttered. "No pressure then." Ree bit her lip, her fingers flying over the keys with a speed that was almost hypnotic. "I just need a few more minutes." "Better make it fast," Ticho said, his gaze fixed on the corridor. "I don't think the Zelter are going to wait around for us to finish our business." The building shuddered, a low rumble that seemed to come from the very bowels of the structure. It was as if the universe was giving them a gentle reminder that it could end them at any moment. "Okay, I'm in," Ree announced, her voice triumphant. "I've got control of their systems. Let's see how they like a little human ingenuity." She typed a few more commands and the screens around them flickered, the alien text replaced by human language. "I've set their defenses to target their own units," Ree explained, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "That should keep them busy for a while." "Nice work," Ticho said, a grin splitting his face. "Maybe we can actually pull this off." Their moment of triumph was short-lived, however. The building shuddered again, this time with a deep, ominous groan that suggested something very large and very angry was on its way. "That doesn't sound good," Jax said, his eyes wide. "No kidding," Ree replied, her fingers flying over the keys once more. "I think they're trying to override my controls." "Then we need to get out of here," Ticho said, grabbing Ree's arm and pulling her away from the console. "Now." They sprinted for the exit, the floor shaking beneath them as if the building itself was trying to throw them off. Behind them, the screens burst into life once more, the alien text scrolling rapidly as the Zelter systems fought to regain control. They burst out into the open air, the sky overhead darkening as the Zelter superlaser powered up, its energy crackling like a thunderstorm on steroids. "Looks like they're going all out," Ree said, her voice breathless as they ran. "We've got to warn the city." "How?" Jax shouted over the din, his voice tinged with desperation. "We improvise," Ticho replied, his mind racing. "Get to the comms tower and broadcast a warning." The comms tower loomed ahead like a beacon of hope, or possibly a very large target. Either way, it was their only option. As they ran, Ticho couldn't help but think about how absurd it all was. Here they were, 3 humans with a scrappy plan and a handful of tech, trying to outwit a race that was centuries ahead of them. But then again, absurd was kind of humanity's thing. They reached the tower, the entrance unlocked, a small mercy considering everything else was going wrong. Inside, the equipment was old but reliable, a relic of a time when things were built to last. Ree dove for the controls, her fingers dancing over the keys as she brought the system online. "Just a few seconds," she muttered, her voice tight with concentration. The ground shook again, the vibrations rattling through the building like a giant tuning fork. Outside, the superlaser was beginning to glow, its energy building to a terrible crescendo. "Okay, we're live," Ree said, her voice triumphant even as sweat beaded on her forehead. "Let's hope someone's listening." Ticho grabbed the microphone, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "This is Ticho Velkin. If you're hearing this, evacuate the city now. The Zelter are powering up their superlaser, and they're not planning on throwing us a party." Behind him, Jax and Ree were already preparing to leave, their faces set with determination. There was no time to lose. They had to get out before the Zelter turned the entire sector into a smoking crater. As they fled the tower, Ticho couldn't help but think about the odds stacked against them. It was a miracle they'd made it this far, and it was going to take a damn miracle to get them through this. But if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was surviving against all odds. Whether it was dumb luck, sheer stubbornness, or a combination of both, they'd find a way to make it through. And if not, well, at least they'd give the universe one hell of a show. With the Zelter Superlaser looming over their heads like the universe's most expensive guillotine, Tycho Velkin had a choice. Either wallow in existential dread or do what humans do best: improvise, adapt, and pray for decent odds. He turned to Ree, who was deeply engaged in muttering at the console, her fingers working magic on the outdated tech like a conductor directing a very unwilling orchestra. "Tell me you got more tricks up your sleeve," Tycho said, his voice a casual drawl that belied the chaos swirling around them. Ree's eyes flicked up momentarily, a hint of a smirk playing across her lips. "I might. But if I told you now, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it?" "Surprises are for birthdays," Jax interjected, leaning against the console with the casual air of someone too used to being one step away from annihilation. "Unless you've got a cake hidden in there, let's focus on not getting fried." Tycho couldn't help but laugh. Trust Jax to find humor in the midst of impending doom. "Right, no cake. But a new plan might be on the menu." Ree's fingers paused for a fraction of a second, a rare show of attention that suggested Tycho had her interest. "You got a plan, Velkin? Or is this one of those let's run and hope scenarios?" "Bit of both," Tycho replied, shrugging in a way that said this wasn't his first rodeo with the universe trying to kill him. "We've been approaching this all wrong. The Zelter are all about rules, right? Code, logic, ones and zeros. How about we feed them some good old-fashioned chaos?" Ree's eyebrows arched, intrigued despite herself. "I'm listening. Remember that virus we talked about? The one that was supposed to be a precision tool and ended up more like a wrecking ball?" Tycho asked. Ree nodded, a flicker of understanding lighting up her features. "Yeah, the one that fried our toaster as a side effect." "Exactly," Tycho said with a grin that was more wolfish than reassuring. "What if we used it to exploit their rigidity? Throw them so many variables they can't process it fast enough." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "You want to confuse the galaxy's most advanced calculators." "You're nuts," maybe, Tycho conceded, "but if there's one thing we've got that they don't, it's unpredictability." Ree leaned back, considering. "A virus that feeds them nonsense. It could work, but it needs to be something they can't ignore. Something that makes their systems question everything. An existential crisis in code form." "Exactly," Tycho said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Can you do it?" Ree gave him a look that was equal parts confidence and challenge. "I can make their system sing nursery rhymes if that's what it takes." "Perfect," Tycho said, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since this mess began. "Let's give them a taste of human creativity." Ree turned back to the console, her demeanor shifting to one of intense focus. "I'll need a few minutes. And by a few, I mean don't count on this being quick." Jax nodded, surveying the room with a casual vigilance. "We can handle a few minutes. Just make sure whatever you're cooking up hits them like a bad hangover." As Ree worked, Tycho watched, feeling like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of desperation. The console's lights flickered in time with Ree's keystrokes, the hum of technology a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Got it," Ree said suddenly, her voice a mix of triumph and relief. "A little something I like to call Operation Mindfuck. I'm feeding their mainframes a recursive algorithm that'll make them question their own existence." Tycho chuckled. "Brilliant. Let's see how they handle an identity crisis." The building gave another ominous shudder, reminding them that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. Outside, the Superlaser was charging, its power growing with each passing second. "All right, let's make our exit before the Zelter resume their extermination plans," Tycho said, motioning for the door. "Ree, you stay on comms, make sure that virus keeps doing its thing. Jax, keep an eye out for company." Jax gave a mock salute. "Aye, aye, Captain. Let's hope the universe isn't ready to kick us off stage just yet." They moved through the corridors, the air around them vibrating with the tension of impending doom. It was like being inside a drum, waiting for the inevitable beat that would end them. As they reached the exit, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the building. a symphony of destruction that played counterpoint to their hopes of survival. "Seems like they're getting a taste of their own medicine," Ree remarked, her voice almost gleeful as she monitored the effect of her code. "Their systems are trying to rewrite themselves in response to the chaos. It's beautiful in a way, code eating itself. Just make sure it buys us enough time," Ticho said, throwing a glance over his shoulder. "I don't fancy being an alien science project." Outside, the sky was a roiling mass of dark clouds, the superlaser casting an eerie glow that bathed the city in a sickly light. It was like the universe had turned on its horror movie setting, and they were the hapless protagonists. "You know," Jack said as they ran, "I always thought I'd die in a bar brawl or something. This is way more dramatic." "Don't count yourself out just yet," Ticho replied, breathless but defiant. "We might still make it to that bar." They reached the edge of the city, the landscape a patchwork of chaos and destruction. The Zelter drones were in disarray, their usual precision disrupted by Ree's virus. It was working, at least for now. "We need to get back to the maglev," Ticho said, pointing towards the distant outline of the train. "If we can get it running, we can put some distance between us and whatever response they're cooking up." Ree nodded, tucking her communicator into her jacket. "I've set the virus to self-perpetuate. It should keep them distracted long enough for us to make our escape." "Good," Ticho replied, a grim sense of satisfaction settling over him. "Let's move." The ground trembled beneath their feet as they made their way back to the maglev station, the city's infrastructure groaning under the strain of the alien assault. Around them, the remnants of human life clung stubbornly to existence, like weeds growing in the cracks of a broken world. As they boarded the maglev, the doors hissing shut behind them, Ticho took a moment to catch his breath. The train was a relic, like so much else in their world, but it was still more reliable than any alien tech. "Think this old thing will hold up?" Jax asked, his tone light despite the gravity of their situation. "We're about to find out," Ticho replied, hitting the controls with a little more force than necessary. The train shuddered to life, a low rumble building beneath them as it began to move. It wasn't fast, but it was moving, and right now that was enough. As the city receded into the distance, Ticho felt a strange mixture of relief and trepidation. They'd bought themselves time, but it was a fleeting victory. The Zelter would regroup, and when they did, they'd come back stronger and more determined than ever. But for now, they had a chance. A slim, precarious chance to turn the tide in humanity's favor. It was more than they'd had an hour ago, and Ticho was determined to make the most of it. "So, what now?" Ree asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Now," Ticho replied, "we figure out how to turn this step backward into a leap forward. We keep hitting them with what they don't expect. Make their rigidity our ally." Jax chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "Guess we're all about breaking the rules now, huh?" Ticho nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "Damn right. Let's show them what chaos really looks like." As the maglev sped towards their uncertain future, Ticho felt a growing sense of purpose. They were the underdogs, the scrappy humans with nothing to lose and everything to prove. It was a role he was starting to relish, and as long as they had breath in their bodies, the Zelter were in for a fight they wouldn't soon forget. And just maybe, if they played their cards right, they'd get to see another sunrise. Or at least, whatever passed for a sunrise in this grim, chaotic world. The maglev train rattled along the tracks, a clunky metal beast that had seen better days. Ticho Velkin sat slouched in his seat, eyes fixed on the flickering lights of the city receding into the distance. Every so often, the train hiccuped, threatening to give up the ghost, but it soldiered on, much like its passengers. "Think this tin can's gonna make it?" Jax asked, glancing at Ticho with a lazy grin that spoke of someone who'd long ago made peace with the idea of dying in a rusty death trap. "Hope so," Ticho replied, "though if it derails, at least we won't have to worry about the Zelter anymore." "Silver linings, right?" Jax chuckled. "Death by train crash sounds more glamorous than being vaporized by an alien death ray. I'll take it." Lies sat across from them, her fingers working furiously on her battered communicator. "Your optimism is infectious, boys," she said without looking up, her voice laced with dry sarcasm. Ticho smirked and gestured towards her device. "How's our little existential crisis for the Zelter going?" "Operation Mindfuck is doing its thing," replied, a touch of pride in her voice. "Their systems are trying to figure out if they exist or not. It's like watching a dog chase its tail. Let's just hope they don't catch it," Ticho muttered, running a hand through his hair. The train lurched around a bend, and the city slipped entirely from view, leaving them alone in the dark wilderness of a world gone mad. A few flickering stars struggled against the glow of the superlaser, which hung in the sky like a cosmic guillotine. "So what's the plan?" Jax asked, shifting in his seat. "Or are we just winging it and hoping for the best?" Ticho shrugged. "A bit of both. We keep their systems tangled up long enough for us to get out of Dodge. Then we find somewhere to regroup and figure out how to turn this into a win." "Sounds almost like a plan," Jax said with a wink. "That's 'cause it kinda is," Ticho replied. "We've thrown them off balance and they don't know how to deal with it. It's like trying to teach a cat to fetch." Snorted. "Cats would rather watch the world burn than fetch anything." "Exactly," Ticho said. "And we're betting the Zelter can't cope with the chaos we've unleashed." The maglev's lights flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment the world went dark. But just as quickly the lights returned, the train doggedly continuing its journey. "Well, at least the train's more reliable than my last girlfriend," Jax quipped, eliciting a chuckle from Ticho. "Your taste in women is your own fault," said, smirking. The banter was a balm against the oppressive tension that hung over them, a reminder of their humanity in the face of cold, alien logic. But beneath it all, they knew the outcome was still uncertain. The Zelter were formidable, and if they managed to untangle the chaos Ree had sown, the next round would be bloody. "Think those alien bastards ever get tired?" Jax wondered aloud. "If I were them, I'd be annoyed that a bunch of humans were giving me this much trouble." "Annoyed, maybe," Ticho said, "but tired. No, they're machines, remember. No downtime, no sleep, no need for a drink after a long day of trying to exterminate us." Ree tapped at her communicator, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They may not get tired, but they sure as hell don't like surprises. This virus is like letting a hyperactive kid loose in their control room." "Good thing we've got you acting as the kid," Ticho said with a grin. Ree rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. "I've got the virus set to loop and replicate. It's like an endless prank call, and they're scrambling to figure out which button to push to make it stop." "Annoying them into submission," Jax mused. "I like it. It's a very human touch." "Well," Ticho said, "if there's one thing we're good at, it's being a pain in the ass." The sky outside the train window was a sullen gray, thick with clouds and the oppressive glow of the superlaser. Ticho watched it with a mix of dread and determination. They'd bought time, yes, but they needed to do more. They had to figure out a way to turn their temporary distraction into a permanent victory. "Think they'll figure out the virus?" Jax asked, breaking the silence. Ree shrugged. "Eventually, maybe, but it won't be easy. Their systems are built to follow strict protocols, and what we're doing flies in the face of all that. It's like asking a mathematician to paint a picture." "Ever the poet," Jax teased. "Hey, if this hacking thing doesn't work out, I might try my hand at writing," Ree shot back, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. As the landscape zipped by, Ticho's mind raced. They needed a plan, a real plan, not just running on chaos and hope. The virus was a good start, but it was only a start. They had to find a way to take the fight to the Zelter, to turn their rigidity against them in a more decisive way. "Got any ideas, Ticho?" Ree asked, sensing his thoughts. "Just one," Ticho said. "We need to find a way to sabotage the superlaser directly. Knock out their weapon and we're no longer a bullseye for extermination." "Great," Jax said. "And how do we do that without getting vaporized?" "We'll figure it out," Ticho replied, though he knew it sounded more confident than he felt. "Ree, can you use the virus to pinpoint any weaknesses in their systems? Something we can exploit?" Ree nodded. I'll see what I can do. It's like trying to find a single thread in a tangled mess, but if there's a way to exploit their tech, I'll find it. Good, Ticho said. Then we just need to regroup, find the right moment to strike, and give them a taste of their own medicine. Sounds like a party, Jax said. Just make sure there's an open bar. The train continued its steady march away from the city, the hum of its engines a reminder of the fragility of their situation. They'd taken the first step, but there were miles to go before they'd truly turn the tables. Think we can really pull this off? Jax asked after a while, his voice quieter than usual. I don't know, Ticho admitted. But I'd rather go down swinging than sit around waiting for the end. Spoken like a true hero, Ree said dryly. Or an idiot, Ticho replied with a grin. But hey, if we're going out, let's make it memorable. They lapsed into silence, the train carrying them towards an uncertain future. But despite the looming threats, there was a sense of camaraderie among them, a shared defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. The Zelter had underestimated humanity once, and that mistake had given them a fighting chance. Ticho intended to make sure it was a mistake the aliens would never forget. As they sped through the dark, Ticho's mind turned over possibilities, trying to piece together a plan from the scraps of hope and determination they had left. They were the underdogs, the unlikely heroes in a world gone mad, but maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Hey, Ree said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with an idea. What if we could use their own weapon against them? Ticho arched an eyebrow. Go on. If we can get close enough to override the targeting systems, we might be able to redirect the superlaser, Ree explained, her enthusiasm growing. Make it hit one of their own ships instead. Use their death ray to shoot themselves in the foot. I like it, Jax said, grinning. Assuming we don't get fried in the process. It's risky, Ree admitted, but it's a shot. And right now, a shot's better than nothing, Ticho said, feeling a spark of hope reignite. So how do we get that close without getting obliterated? Ree thought for a moment. They'll be focused on untangling the virus. If we time it right, we might be able to slip in while they're distracted. Slip in where? Jax asked, a note of skepticism in his voice. Their command ship, Ree replied, her eyes gleaming with challenge. It's a long shot, but their defenses might be thin if we hit them when they're least expecting it. Sounds like a suicide mission, Jax said, though there was a note of admiration in his voice. It's a mission, Ticho said. And sometimes, those are the only kind worth taking. As the train rattled on through the night, carrying them towards the next chapter in their desperate struggle, Ticho allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They weren't out of the woods yet, far from it, but they had a plan. A wild, reckless plan that just might give them the edge they needed. Here's to chaos, Ticho said, raising an imaginary glass. To chaos, Jax and Ree echoed, sharing a moment of gallows humor. And with that, they settled in, ready to face whatever came next. Because in a universe that seemed hellbent on wiping them out, they were determined to prove that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, no matter how many rules needed to be broken along the way. The city, or what was left of it, looked like a child's play set after a particularly aggressive tantrum. Buildings leaned precariously, rubble littered the streets, and the air hung heavy with the scent of burnt circuitry and crushed dreams. But against all odds, or perhaps because of them, humanity was starting to stitch itself back together with the same stubborn tenacity that had seen them through every other apocalypse du jour. Ticho Velkin surveyed the chaos with a sort of grim satisfaction. The Zelter had been sent packing, their superlaser now a charred relic of its former self, courtesy of some deft human ingenuity mixed with a healthy dose of blind luck. But hey, whatever worked. Jax nudged him with an elbow, a smirk tugging at his lips. Not bad for a bunch of hairless apes, Ticho chuckled, though it was more of a dry cough. We did all right. Who'd have thought a rolling blackout could turn into a strategic advantage? Jax shrugged, scanning the horizon where the occasional spark of a plasma torch signaled rebuilding efforts. They underestimated us. Thought we were all bluster and no bite, and we proved them wrong, Ticho said, leaning against a crumbling wall and crossing his arms. Turns out we bite pretty damn hard. The irony wasn't lost on him. In their quest to save their own skins, humanity had managed to turn the Zelter's rigidity against them. Titcho figured it was a testament to the human spirit, though he wasn't one for grand declarations. Too many variables, too much chaos. But he had to admit, it felt good to have the upper hand for once. Liz walked up, her communicator tucked under one arm. The device had been through hell much like its owner, but both seemed to be in working order. They're still trying to figure out what hit them, she announced with a grin, her eyes alight with mischief. Titcho raised an eyebrow. Operation Mindfuck still in effect, reconfirmed, tapping the battered device with pride. Their systems are so tangled up they're practically knitting themselves into a sweater. Good, Titcho said with a nod. Let them stew. Gives us time to strengthen our defenses, Jax snorted, and maybe get a drink or three. I'd kill for a beer right about now. Amen to that, Ree said, though her focus was already shifting back to the task at hand. The city might be in shambles, but there was work to do. Humans didn't know how to sit still, even in victory. As they wandered through the ruins, the trio exchanged banter, the kind that comes from surviving the impossible together. They passed by teams of workers who were already erecting makeshift shelters and restoring power lines with the sort of determination that was as admirable as it was foolhardy. Think they'll be back? Jax asked, his tone casual but his eyes serious. The Zelter, Titcho shrugged, maybe, but they've got a lot to think about first. Their whole strategy was predicated on the idea that we'd roll over and play dead. Well, we showed them, didn't we? Ree said, her smirk widening into a full-blown grin. Nothing like a little unpredictability to spice things up. Titcho nodded. Exactly. They're all ones and zeros. We're everything in between. As they continued their walk, the city's central node came into view. It was a miracle it was still standing, given the pounding it had taken, but there it was, a testament to something. Titcho wasn't sure if it was human resilience or just plain stubbornness. A worker with soot-streaked cheeks waved them over. Titcho, right? We're getting some systems back online, but it's a mess. We could use another set of hands. Titcho exchanged a glance with Jax and Ree. What do you think? Why not? Ree said. I came here to fix stuff and I'm not leaving until I do, yeah, cause what's one more impossible job, Jax added, rolling his eyes. Count me in. With that, they joined the throng of workers, slipping seamlessly into the chaos. It was comforting in a weird way to be part of something bigger, a collective effort to rebuild, to reclaim what had been lost. And sure, the Zelter might come back, but they'd be ready. Titcho was certain of that. He knelt beside a console, his fingers dancing over the keys as he worked to reroute power. The lights flickered, but there was a pulse of life to them now, a sign that things were slowly returning to some semblance of normal. Well, what do you know? Titcho said, grinning at the console like it was an old friend. Sometimes things actually go right. Don't jinx it, Ree warned, though there was a warmth in her voice that suggested she didn't mind a bit of optimism now and then. For a while, the only sound was the clatter of tools and the hum of machinery. It was a symphony of survival, a reminder that no matter how often they got knocked down, humans always found a way to get back up. Hey, Titcho, Jax said after a spell. You ever think about what's next? Titcho paused, considering the question. Not really, he admitted. But maybe that's the point. We take it as it comes, adapt, survive. Sounds like a plan, Jax said with a grin. Or at least less of a disaster than usual. Here's hoping, Ree added, though there was a note of hope in her voice. If we can outsmart a bunch of alien overlords, maybe we can figure out how to fix this place too. Titcho nodded, feeling a spark of something akin to hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They'd come together, face down a threat that had seemed insurmountable, and come out the other side. And if the Zelter ever showed their shiny, metallic faces again, they'd be ready. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a wash of gold and shadow, Titcho allowed himself a moment to breathe. The future was uncertain as it always had been, but for now they were alive. They were together, and they were still standing. "Hey," Ree said, breaking the silence. "We did it, didn't we?" "Yeah," Ticho replied, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, we did." And with that they returned to their work, the hum of humanity's indomitable spirit echoing through the ruins as they set about creating a new world from the ashes of the old. Because if there was one thing Ticho had learned, it was that humans were nothing if not persistent, stubborn, irreverent, and utterly unpredictable. And in the grand scheme of the universe, maybe that was enough. As they worked, the city's central node flickered to life, casting a warm glow over them. It was a beacon of hope in a world that had forgotten what hope looked like, and it was all the sweeter for its fragility. "Here's to chaos," Jack said, raising an imaginary glass. "To chaos," Ree and Ticho echoed, sharing a moment of gallows humor. And with that, they settled in, ready to face whatever came next. Because in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out, they were determined to prove that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, no matter how many rules needed to be broken along the way.